They saw her sitting alone in the corner of the yard and made the same mistake everyone made the first time. Quiet girl, thin shoulders, downcast eyes, no visitors, no friends worth naming. In a place like Blackwater Women's Penitentiary, that kind of silence looked like weakness, and weakness never stayed unpunished for long. By the time the afternoon bell rang, 5 women were already circling her. The tallest one stepped forward first, rolling her neck like she was warming up for sport. Another cracked her knuckles. A third leaned in close enough to smell the cheap soap on the girl's skin and smiled like she had found something fragile to break. The girl didn't answer. She just sat there on the low concrete bench, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the dust near her shoes. That only made them bolder. One of them grabbed a fistful of her hair and jerked her head back. "Hey," she snapped, "when I talk to you, you look at me." Still nothing. No screaming, no begging, not even a flinch. The women around her laughed. To them, it was perfect. The easiest kind of victim was the one who looked too broken to fight back. Then one of them slapped her, hard. The crack echoed across the yard, and that was when the laughter stopped. Not because the girl moved, because everyone else did. All at once, the women watching from the corners of the prison yard stood up. Conversations died mid-sentence. The 5 attackers noticed it too late. One of them frowned and looked around. "Why's everyone staring?" No one answered her. Then the girl on the bench slowly raised her eyes. For the first time, she looked directly at them, and the woman still clutching her hair felt her stomach drop. There was nothing weak in that face, nothing soft, nothing lost, nothing helpless. The girl's expression was calm, too calm, the kind of calm people only had when they already knew exactly how this was going to end. The woman tried to let go. She didn't get the chance. In one movement so fast it barely looked real, the quiet girl twisted her wrist, dragged her off balance, and slammed her face, first into the concrete bench. There was a sickening crack, followed by a scream that tore through the yard. Before the others could react, she was already on her feet. The second woman came at her from the side. Bad choice. The quiet girl ducked, drove her elbow straight into the woman's ribs, then kicked the back of her knee so hard the woman collapsed with a howl. The third rushed in wild, all rage and no discipline. The girl caught her by the throat, shoved her into the chain-link fence, and held her there just long enough for panic to bloom in her eyes. Then she let go. The woman dropped to the ground, gasping. The remaining 2 backed up immediately. Too late for dignity. Too late for mercy. The yard had gone silent. Every inmate was watching now, but not with surprise, with recognition, with fear. One of the older women near the laundry line lowered her head and muttered almost like a prayer, "They really touched her." Another whispered, "Idiots." The girl stepped forward once. That was enough. One of the last 2 women dropped to her knees before she even got close. Wait, I didn't know," she stammered. "I swear, I didn't know who you were." The girl stared down at her without emotion. Who you were. That was the part that mattered, because inside Blackwater, everyone knew her name. Her name was Elena, and for the last 3 years, she had ruled that prison like a ghost no one dared challenge twice. No official gang claimed her. No protection unit walked beside her. She didn't need either. Undefeated. Untouchable. Hidden in plain sight. A myth in prison gray. The women who understood the rules moved fast. 2 inmates rushed forward, dragging the attackers back before Elena had to touch them again. Elena ignored the chair, ignored the water too. Her breathing had already gone steady again, like violence cost her nothing at all. One of the older inmates approached carefully. "You want us to handle them?" Elena wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with her thumb and looked at it for half a second. Then she said, quietly, "No." Just one word. Still, every woman around her straightened like they had received a direct command. That was her power. She never needed to shout, never needed to posture. For all the fear she inspired, there was one truth. No one in Blackwater understood better than she did. Ruling hell was still living in hell. She did not care about being feared. She did not care about being untouchable. And she definitely did not care about being called queen of a place built to erase people. What she wanted was out. Not freedom for its own sake. Revenge. Because 3 years ago, when she was only 18, the Cross family had destroyed her life with smiling faces and clean hands. They had taken in the orphan girl the world pitied, raised her under their roof, fed her at their table, let everyone believe she was one of them. Then, the moment she became inconvenient, they buried her. Her adoptive mother cried on command. Her adoptive father signed papers without looking her in the eye. And Sophia Cross, their real daughter, their golden girl, their perfect princess, stood in the middle of it all and watched Elena take the fall. One accusation, one setup, one sealed file, and Elena was sent to Blackwater like she had never been human at all. Not a daughter, not even a person, just a problem they needed gone. The prison had taken many things from her after that. Her name, her future, her trust. But it had also burned something else into her bones. Patience. If she ever got out, she would not come back crying. She would come back prepared. She would tear the Cross family apart piece by piece, and she would make them feel every second of the fear they had fed her. An alarm suddenly ripped through the yard. Not the usual warning bell. This one was different, sharper, urgent. Every head turned toward the main gate. The first steel door groaned open, then the second. Women started shouting from the upper walkways. Guards ran across the perimeter with their hands on their weapons. Somewhere down the east corridor, someone screamed. Another voice yelled for everyone to get down. For one brief, impossible second, the whole prison seemed to forget how to breathe. Then chaos exploded. Inmates scattered in every direction. Some thought it was a raid. Others thought someone important had been killed. A few simply ran, because in a place like Blackwater, confusion was usually the closest thing to opportunity. Elena didn't move. She stood in the center of the storm, eyes fixed on the gate. A convoy of black vehicles rolled into the prison yard. The car in the middle stopped first. A tall man stepped out in a dark coat, flanked by armed security. Elena had never seen him before, but she knew instantly what kind of man he was. The kind who changed lives with a signature. The kind who buried enemies where no one would find them. The kind who never came for nothing. One of the wardens rushed to meet him, nearly tripping over herself. She spoke fast, nervous, deferential. He barely listened. His gaze moved over the terrified inmates one by one. Then it stopped. On Elena. Everything in the yard seemed to freeze. He studied her face for a long moment, unreadable. Then he said, "That one." Not loud. He didn't need to be. The words landed harder than a gunshot. Around Elena, women who feared no one lowered their eyes. Because somehow, impossibly, the most feared girl in Blackwater had just been chosen by someone even worse. And for the first time in 3 years, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten. Not fear. Not exactly. Something colder. The feeling that the cage door had opened. But not for freedom. For most women inside Blackwater, the sound of those gates opening meant one thing. A miracle. A pardon. A transfer. A mistake in the system. A rich relative pulling strings. Some impossible accident that turned a life sentence into sunlight. For Elena, it meant something else entirely. a trap. She stood in the prison yard with blood still drying across her knuckles as the black convoy idled behind the armed men. Around her, chaos kept spreading. Inmates shoved each other trying to get a better look. Guards barked orders they clearly no longer controlled. Nobody understood why someone like Adrian Vale would step foot inside a place like Blackwater. But everyone understood one thing. If Adrian Vale had come here in person, it was not for a small reason. Even the wardens looked afraid of him. That alone told Elena more than any file ever could. Men with badges feared the law. Men like Adrian Vale made the law nervous. He stood with one hand in his coat pocket, expression unreadable, like the screams, the sirens, the barbed wire, and the stench of despair around him were all mildly inconvenient details in an otherwise ordinary day. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe mid-20s, but there was nothing youthful about the way he held power. He did not fidget. He did not posture. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The whole prison had already bent toward him. The warden hurried over and stopped just short of bowing. "Mr. Vale, we pulled the files you requested, but there are still safer candidates inside the medical wing. Girls with no violent history, no disciplinary—" "No," Adrian said. "Just that. One word, flat and final." His eyes remained on Elena. "I want her." The warden swallowed. "Sir, that inmate is unstable." A faint pause. Then Adrian asked, "Unstable?" The woman nodded too quickly. "Severe trauma symptoms, dissociation, episodes of disorganized behavior. She's been classified as mentally unfit for normal release review." Elena lowered her gaze at once. "Good. Let them say it. Let them believe it." Over the last 3 years, she had learned that in hell, strength kept you alive. But madness made people underestimate you. And being underestimated was its own kind of weapon. Especially now. Because if this man knew who she really was, if he knew she had not been broken by Blackwater, if he knew her mind was sharp and her memory even sharper, then whatever game he was playing would become far more dangerous. So Elena let her shoulders soften. Let her eyes go distant. Let her body go still in that peculiar, unsettling way people associated with damaged minds and fragile nerves. A harmless girl, a strange girl, a girl too ruined to be worth fearing. From the corner of her eye, she saw a few inmates catch on and immediately lower their heads. They knew the routine. Inside Blackwater, whenever guards came too close, whenever officials asked questions, whenever outsiders wanted a clean explanation for the violence that seemed to follow Elena like a shadow, the answer was always the same. She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's not all there. That lie had protected her more than once. Now it might be the only reason she survived whatever came next. Adrian took a slow step forward, then another. He stopped right in front of her. Elena kept her eyes lowered. Silence stretched between them. She could feel him studying her face, not casually, not like a man looking over property, but like someone searching for something buried beneath skin and bone, something familiar, something lost. At last he spoke. "How old?" The warden answered for her. 21. Adrian said nothing. The warden rushed to fill the silence. No verified family in the system. No reliable identification when she was processed. We believe she was abandoned young, possibly homeless before detention. Her records are incomplete. Incomplete. What a neat word for what had really happened. Her records were not incomplete. They were erased, because the Cross family had made sure the girl they destroyed would vanish so completely that no one outside those walls could ever pull her back into the light. Adrian's gaze did not shift. And the diagnosis? Schizoaffective features, according to the prison psychiatrist, the warden said. Severe emotional fracture, unpredictable behavior, But physically, she has tested clear. No contagious illness, no substance dependency, no threat level beyond occasional incidents. Beyond occasional incidents. That almost made Elena laugh. The most feared woman in Blackwater reduced to a soft line in a report. But she kept her face empty. Adrian tilted his head very slightly. For the first time, Elena made the mistake of looking up. Their eyes met, and instantly, she understood why men twice his age lost courage in his presence. His stare was not loud or theatrical. It was worse than that. It was precise, cold, a blade without decoration. He looked at people the way other men looked at numbers. Useful, useless, dangerous, replaceable. Except right now, he wasn't looking at her like any of those things. He looked almost arrested, as though something in her face had reached into the past and put a hand around his throat. A flicker, that was all. Then it was gone. "She's the one," he said. The words went through the yard like a chill. The warden blinked. "Sir, you haven't even seen the others." "No need." He turned away as if the decision had already hardened into fact the moment he stepped through the gate. The warden hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Mr. Vale, with respect, girls like her don't leave Blackwater, not unless someone powerful wants them for something." Adrian glanced back. "And what do you think I am?" The warden went pale. "I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant." He motioned once with 2 fingers. One of his men stepped forward with papers. Transfer orders, authorization seals, signatures from places no ordinary citizen would ever touch. Elena's heart did not race. It slowed. That was how she knew the danger was real. Fast fear was for simple threats. This felt like stepping onto ice and hearing it crack beneath her feet. 2 guards approached to escort her. She did not resist. That would make no sense for the girl she was pretending to be. Instead, she let them guide her like someone too dazed to understand what was happening. As they led her across the yard, she heard the whispers rise behind her. Vale came himself. "Why her? She's finished." "No," another inmate muttered under her breath. "Not finished. Taken." That word stayed with Elena. Taken. At the vehicle, one of Adrian's men opened the door. Inside was not freedom. No sunlight and open road. No paper bag with release clothes. No sympathetic caseworker explaining second chances. The interior was dark leather, tinted glass, controlled air, locked doors, a moving cage built by better hands. Elena ducked inside and sat without a sound. Adrian entered from the other side a moment later. The door shut. The world outside vanished. For the first minute, neither of them spoke. The convoy began to move. Elena fixed her eyes on the black glass and let her reflection look hollow. Broken girls did not ask questions. Broken girls did not reveal curiosity. Broken girls survived by letting powerful men talk first. Adrian did not. He simply sat there, one arm resting against the door, watching her with the same unnerving stillness. At last he said, "You're not afraid of me." Elena blinked once, then looked away, making her expression go vague again. He waited. When she said nothing, he gave the slightest hint of amusement. "Or maybe you don't understand what fear's supposed to look like." Still, she stayed silent. Inside, her mind was moving fast. What did he want? Why her? Why now? A man like Adrian Vale did not raid the most brutal women's prison in the country to collect a random broken girl. Men like him did not act from pity. They did not rescue, they acquired. And then a possibility formed. Not a good one, a useful one. She turned her face a little toward the window, enough to catch his reflection without directly meeting his eyes. He was still watching her, not with lust, not with simple curiosity, with grief, buried deep, controlled almost beyond recognition. But there, her stomach tightened. So that was it. Not desire, recognition, or something close enough to it to be dangerous. Someone in his past, someone dead, someone whose shadow she had the misfortune to resemble. That explained the fixation, the prison visit, the refusal to consider anyone else. Elena lowered her lashes again and let her breathing stay soft and uneven. If Adrian Vale had taken her because she looked like someone he had lost, then that grief might be the very thing keeping her alive. For now, the convoy drove for what felt like hours. No city sounds reached her through the glass. No clues, no exits. Just the faint hum of expensive machinery and the invisible pressure of a man whose presence seemed to make oxygen thinner. Eventually, the vehicle passed through iron gates and rolled to a stop. When Elena stepped out, she found herself staring at an estate so vast it barely looked real in the fading evening light. Stone walls, tall windows, manicured grounds, security at every corner. It wasn't a home. It was a kingdom built for someone who trusted no one. Servants stood waiting in silence. No one greeted her. No one smiled. No one asked if she was cold, hungry, frightened, or confused. They looked at her the way staff in old houses looked at an object their master had brought back unexpectedly. Not their concern, but very much their problem. A woman in black stepped forward. "This way." Elena did not move. The woman glanced nervously at Adrian. He gave no explanation, no introduction. He only said, "Clean her up, medical screening first, then put her in the East Wing." The woman hesitated. "Sir, the East Wing?" His eyes flicked toward her. That was enough. "Yes, Mr. Vale. East Wing. Important then. Protected. Or haunted." Elena followed them through long corridors lined with paintings too expensive to be decoration. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of controlled obsession. No dust, no warmth, no life left to chance. In a private examination room, staff checked her vitals, tested her reflexes, drew blood, and spoke around her as though she weren't truly there. No infectious markers. No visible withdrawal symptoms. Old scar tissue on the wrists. Malnutrition history, but stable now. Then quieter, one of them said, "She really does look like her." Another answered, "Don't say that out loud." Elena kept her face slack, but inside, every nerve sharpened. Like her, there it was. Confirmation. Someone dead, most likely. Someone important enough that even the staff knew better than to speak too freely. By the time they brought her upstairs, the sky had darkened. Her room was larger than the cell block she had lived in at Blackwater. Soft bed, private bath, locked windows, a silver tray of untouched food. Luxury had dressed itself up as kindness. But Elena knew better. A gilded room was still a room with one door and guards outside. She walked to the window and tried it once. Locked, of course. Behind her, the maid said, "Mr. Vale will see you later." Elena turned slightly, letting confusion show. The woman seemed uncomfortable. "You are to stay here unless instructed otherwise. Stay here, unless instructed otherwise. Not guest language, not rescue language, ownership language." When the room was empty again, Elena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. Blackwater had been simple, brutal, filthy, merciless, but simple. You knew where you stood. You knew the rules. You knew who wanted to hurt you. This place was different. Silk over steel, quiet over screaming. But the danger in it was deeper. Because prison had tried to crush her body, this place might try to swallow her identity whole. An hour later, she heard footsteps outside the door, measured, unhurried, certain. The handle turned. Adrian entered alone. He had removed his coat. In the warmer light, he looked even more unreal. Handsome in a way that invited trouble. severe in a way that promised it. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her as though checking whether she had vanished. Elena made herself shrink slightly, just enough. Harmless. Disturbed. No threat. His gaze moved over her face again, and once more she saw it, that impossible collision between calculation and memory. He was not seeing only her. He was seeing someone else layered over her like a ghost. At last he spoke. "From today on, you stay here." Elena kept still. "You go nowhere without permission." His tone remained calm, but there was iron beneath it. "No one touches you unless I allow it. No one questions you unless I approve it. And if you try to run—" He stopped. Elena slowly lifted her eyes. The silence that followed was somehow worse than if he had shouted. Then he finished. "I will find you. No threat performance, no cruelty for effect, just certainty." He turned to leave, then paused at the door without looking back. For the first time, his voice changed, only slightly, but enough for grief to slip through. "You should consider yourself lucky," he said. "No one else would have made me open those gates." Then he walked out. The lock clicked behind him. Elena sat very still in the center of a room bigger than anything she had ever slept in, and understood, finally, exactly what had happened. She had not been rescued from Blackwater. She had not been freed. She had been selected, removed, brought here for a reason that had nothing to do with mercy. And whatever Adrian Vale saw when he looked at her, it did not belong to her. The prison gates had opened, yes, but only so one cage could trade her to another. And this one came with softer sheets, quieter walls, and a man dangerous enough to make Blackwater feel honest. That was when Elena understood the truth. She had not been saved. She had been claimed. The first night Elena slept in Adrian Vale's mansion, she did not sleep at all. She lay still beneath sheets softer than anything she had touched in 3 years and stared at the ceiling as moonlight spilled across the glass walls. The room was beautiful in the kind of way that felt expensive rather than warm. Every line was clean, every surface gleamed. Every object had clearly been chosen by someone who valued control more than comfort. Nothing in the room was accidental, not the placement of the bed, not the locked windows, not the camera tucked so discreetly into the corner that most people would have missed it, not the silence, especially not the silence. Blackwater had never been quiet. There were always screams somewhere, metal doors slamming, guards barking orders, women crying in the dark and pretending they weren't. But this place was different. The quiet here had weight. It pressed against the glass and marble and polished wood like the house itself was holding its breath. Elena turned her head slightly and looked toward the door, locked from the outside. Of course. She let out a breath through her nose and almost smiled. Same cage. Better wallpaper. In the morning, no one knocked. The door simply opened, and 2 women entered carrying trays and garment bags. They moved with the practiced stiffness of employees who had long ago learned not to ask questions. "Bath first," one of them said softly. Elena didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hair loose around her shoulders and let her gaze drift somewhere past them, the way a damaged girl might. It was a performance she had sharpened into an art form long before Adrian Vale came for her. In prison, madness made you unpredictable. In rich houses, it made people talk too much around you. The women exchanged a glance. "Mr. Vale wants you downstairs after breakfast," the second one said. That got Elena's attention, though she did not show it. Wants. Not invites, not requests, wants. She let them guide her through the motions. Warm water, clean clothes, A pale sweater and soft trousers someone had chosen because they made her look even younger, even gentler, even more like the version of her Adrian apparently preferred. That alone told her something. He did not want the woman Blackwater had made. He wanted a ghost. By the time she was led downstairs, Elena had already counted the hallway cameras, the footstep timing of the guards, the distance between the east wing and the side entrance, and the security pattern in the grounds beyond the glass. She did it automatically now, the way other people might notice weather. Survival had turned every room into a map. The dining room was flooded with morning light. Adrian sat at the far end of a table long enough for a family of 20, though he occupied it alone. Dark shirt, sleeves rolled once, coffee untouched, a tablet beside his plate. He looked less like a man having breakfast than a king hearing reports from a battlefield. He did not look up when Elena entered. "Sit." She stayed standing, his eyes lifted at last. There it was again, that cold, surgical stare that seemed to peel through skin and posture and lies. Elena lowered her gaze half a second too late. A mistake. He noticed everything. "I said sit." Slowly, she obeyed. A servant moved to place food in front of her, but Adrian raised 2 fingers without taking his eyes off Elena, and the servant froze. "What does she usually eat?" he asked. The woman blinked. "Sir?" "At Blackwater," Adrian said. "What did they feed her?" The servant looked horrified. I wouldn't know, sir." "Then find out." "Yes, Mr. Vale." Elena looked down at the plate in front of her. Eggs, toast, fruit cut too perfectly to have been done by human hands, and understood his point immediately. Not kindness, control. He did not want her comfortable. He wanted her calibrated. Adrian took a sip of coffee. "You'll eat what I approve. You'll wear what I provide. You'll stay where I place you." Elena lifted a piece of fruit and stared at it as if distracted. From the outside, she looked vacant. Inside, she was cataloging tone, rhythm, weakness. He spoke to her like she belonged to him, not romantically, not even personally. More like an item he had brought into the house and had no intention of losing. "That bracelet on your wrist," he said. Elena's fingers stilled. The prison tag, modified now, hidden beneath polished stone and metal, but still there. "It stays covered," he went on. "No one outside this house sees it. No one asks about it. If they do, you say nothing." So he knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough to understand that what she wore on her wrist could expose her. Interesting. He was protecting her, or protecting his investment. Neither option was safe. One of the housemaids entered in a rush, clearly nervous. "Sir, Dr. Mercer is here." "Send him in." A silver-haired man in a tailored coat stepped inside a moment later carrying a leather case. He stopped when he saw Elena, and for one brief second, real surprise crossed his face. Then pity. Elena hated pity. Dr. Mercer approached slowly, like one might approach a skittish animal. "May I?" She said nothing. Adrian answered for her. "Do what you need." The examination that followed was clinical, efficient, and humiliating in its own quiet way. Pulse, pupils, scars, reflexes. Basic questions Elena refused to answer. Through it all, Adrian stood near the window, watching like a man overseeing a transaction, not a patient. At last, Dr. Mercer closed his case. "Well?" Adrian asked. "She's physically stable," the doctor said carefully. "Malnourished history, chronic stress markers, older injuries, but nothing acute, mentally." He glanced at Elena. "I'd say trauma, severe mistrust, dissociation patterns, but not psychosis." A beat. Adrian's face did not change. Not psychosis? No. So the prison records lied. They simplified, the doctor said, or someone wanted them to. Elena kept her head bowed, but a small thrill moved through her chest. Good. Now she knew Adrian had not arranged those fake records himself. He was learning as he went. That meant he did not control the entire board yet. Dr. Mercer hesitated. There is something else. Adrian waited. The doctor chose his words too carefully, which meant they mattered. The resemblance is stronger up close. Elena felt the room tighten. Adrian's hand stilled against the window frame. Dr. Mercer swallowed. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have said that. Adrian's voice turned flat. Then don't say it again. The doctor nodded once, gathered his case, and left. The door closed. For a long moment, neither Adrian nor Elena moved. Then Adrian said, almost to himself, "You even sit the same way." The words slipped out quieter than the rest. Not meant for servants, not meant for the room. A confession accidentally left unguarded. And suddenly Elena understood with complete certainty what had only been suspicion before. She was not here because she looked like a former lover, not an ex, not a dead fiancé. Something deeper, older, worse, a sister. The thought changed everything. A lost lover made a man reckless. A dead sister made him haunted, which meant his fixation was not driven by hunger. It was driven by grief twisted into obsession. That was safer. No, Elena corrected herself. Not safer, just different. Adrian turned toward her. The softness vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Come here. She did not move. His gaze sharpened. Do not make me repeat myself. Slowly, Elena rose and crossed the space between them. He reached up. Every nerve in her body lit at once. For a fraction of a second, she thought, this is it. Not rescue. Not memory. Not control. This. But Adrian only brushed a strand of damp hair back from her face and studied her with a look so grim it almost felt like anger. You keep waiting for me to become a monster, he said. Elena kept her expression blank. A dry, humorless smile touched his mouth. That's probably wise. Then, without warning, he stepped away. No touch beyond that. No demand. No violation. Just distance. It unnerved her more than if he had acted exactly as she feared. Because it meant he had rules she could not yet see. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Elena distrusted on sight. Breakfast downstairs. Silence at the table. Doctors, staff, security, servants all orbiting Adrian's commands as if he were gravity itself. He never asked whether she was comfortable. Never asked whether she wanted anything. But he noticed everything regardless. If she picked at food, the menu changed. If she paused too long at a window, an extra guard appeared outside. If she walked the eastern hallway twice, the next day the western wing was unlocked instead, as though he were feeding her just enough freedom to watch how she used it. And sometimes, late at night, she heard music, not from speakers, from a piano somewhere in the mansion. The first time she followed the sound, she found him alone in a dim room lined with glass and dark wood, sitting at the instrument with his back to her. He was not playing well, but he played like a man trying to strangle memory with his hands. Elena stayed hidden in the doorway. He did not turn around. Evelyn used to hate when I missed that note, he said. Elena went completely still. Evelyn. There it was. A name. His sister. Adrian's hands rested on the keys. She said I rushed the sad parts because I couldn't stand sitting inside them. He finally looked over his shoulder. Not surprised to find Elena there. He had known the entire time. You walk very quietly, he said, but not quietly enough. Elena said nothing. She was 9 years older than me, he said, eyes drifting back to the piano. When everyone else in this house taught me how to obey, She taught me how to lie convincingly. A pause. Useful skill. You'd appreciate it. Elena almost laughed at that. Dark humor. Unexpected. Sharper than sentiment. It made him feel more dangerous, not less. He turned on the bench, studying her face in the low light. When she died, he said, everyone in this house started speaking more softly, as if lower voices could make death respectable. Elena remained in the doorway. And then you appeared. He said it with no wonder at all, only bitterness, as if fate had insulted him personally. That night confirmed what she needed to know. He was not keeping her because he wanted a woman. He was keeping her because grief had found a shape it could project onto. And yet, even that was unstable territory. A man in mourning could be gentle one moment and vicious the next if the illusion cracked. So Elena kept playing her role, harmless, fractured, difficult to read. But inside, she kept building her exit. By the end of the week, she had mapped the house almost completely. 3 external patrol routes, 2 blind spots in camera coverage, a service corridor that led to the lower garage, a kitchen delivery door that opened for exactly 40 seconds every Thursday night. The outer wall was harder. The grounds were flooded after midnight. Dogs were released near the west hedge. The main gate required dual clearance. Still, none of it was impossible. The impossible thing was Adrian himself. He moved without pattern, slept little, and seemed to know when the air in the house shifted before anyone spoke. More than once, Elena tested a path and later found it quietly blocked. Not enough to alarm her, just enough to let her know he saw the same chessboard. One evening, he found her standing by the greenhouse doors, watching rain slide over the glass. "Thinking of running?" he asked. She turned her face away, adopting that far-off look again. He stepped beside her. "If you want to survive in my house, learn this quickly. I am not patient with dishonesty." That, Elena thought, was almost funny. A billionaire heir who weaponized silence and bought women out of prisons was offended by dishonesty. She let one corner of her mouth twitch. Only slightly. But Adrian saw it. His gaze shifted to her face. "Did you just smile at me?" Elena dropped the expression at once. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something more dangerous. Interest. "Good," he said softly. "That means there's a person in there after all." Then the coldness returned. Do not confuse that observation with freedom. That night, Elena made her move. She waited until just after 1 in the morning, when the second shift rotated and the East Corridor cameras reset for 8 seconds during the security transfer. She slipped from her room barefoot, moving through shadow and silence, down the service stairs, across the laundry hall, into the garage passage. No alarm, no voices, no footsteps behind her. At the delivery bay, she found the latch exactly where she had expected. Unlocked, her pulse stayed even. Too easy. She pushed the door open and stepped into the cold night air. For one perfect moment, she felt it. Space, wind, distance, freedom close enough to taste. She crossed the lower garden, slipped through the cypress line, reached the outer wall near the maintenance slope, and used the drainpipe bracket she had noticed 3 days earlier to climb. Halfway up, she heard a voice below. Calm, familiar, much too close. "If you fall from there," Adrian said, "I'll be annoyed." Elena froze. Slowly, she looked down. He stood in the dark with one hand in his pocket, coat unbuttoned, rain touching his shoulders. No guards, no shouting, no panic. Just Adrian, looking up at her like a teacher mildly disappointed by a predictable student. He had known. Of course he had known. She dropped back to the ground lightly, landing a few feet away from him. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian glanced at the wall, then at her bare feet, then at the open service door in the distance. "Well planned," he said. "Except for the part where you assumed I'm stupid." Elena's jaw tightened. "So there she is," he murmured. "The real one." He took one step closer. Not enough to touch, enough to trap. "Do you know what happens if you disappear from me?" he asked. Elena held his stare. "I will have every airport, port, border road, and private checkpoint watching for your face by sunrise." His tone remained almost conversational. "If you cross state lines, I'll know. If you leave the country, I'll know sooner. If you cut your hair, dye it, forge papers, or bury yourself in some nameless town, I will still find you." The rain ran cold down Elena's neck. Adrian's voice dropped lower. "You can run to the edge of the earth if you like. I have the money to be patient." A pause. Dead or alive? There it was. The truth stripped clean. Not a guardian, not a rescuer, an owner. Elena looked past him toward the dark beyond the wall and understood, all at once, the scale of the mistake she was about to make if she kept going. Outside this mansion, she had no money, no protection, a prison history hidden by barely legal paperwork, and enemies waiting for any sign she had resurfaced. Outside this mansion, Adrian Vale would become the hunt, and unlike prison guards or the Cross family, he had reach, real reach, the kind that crossed borders, the kind that did not tire, the kind that ended with bodies found in ditches and names quietly erased. She could keep running tonight, or she could do something smarter, something shocking, something he would never fully expect. Elena lowered her gaze first, not in surrender, in calculation. Then she stepped around him and began walking back toward the mansion. Adrian did not move for a second. That, more than anything, told her she had unsettled him. At the service door, she paused, then looked back over her shoulder. The rain had darkened his hair, softened nothing else. She tilted her head very slightly, as if the choice had been hers all along. And in a way, now it was. If she stayed because he forced her, she was prey. If she returned because she decided to, she was something else. Not captive. Not yet. A player still on the board. Adrian's eyes narrowed, reading the shift, but not the conclusion. "Changed your mind?" he asked. Elena let the faintest trace of dark amusement touch her face. Then she walked back inside on her own terms, not because she trusted him, not because she was afraid, but because sometimes the smartest escape was the one that led you straight back into the cage, until you understood how to burn the whole house down from within. By the time Elena returned to Adrian Vale's mansion, she understood one thing with perfect clarity. Running blindly was for frightened people. She was done being frightened. If she wanted revenge, she would need more than rage. She would need a name the world could recognize, a face no one could trace, and a life that did not lead straight back to Blackwater in chains. Adrian had money, reach, and a terrifying instinct for control, but he had also, without meaning to, given her something priceless: cover. Within days, the final traces of Blackwater began to disappear. The prison tag on her wrist was disguised beneath a polished bracelet, elegant enough to pass in any room. The records tied to her incarceration grew harder to follow. A quiet doctor's visit turned into a sealed identity file. A few signatures later, Elena Cross, the girl the prison had swallowed, became someone else on paper. A new name, a legal existence, a way back into the world. For the first time in 3 years, she held identification in her own hands and felt something dangerously close to freedom. Not true freedom? Not yet. but the first sharp taste of it, the kind that made her chest tighten because she had almost forgotten what it felt like to exist outside a cage. She stood alone in her room, turning the card over between her fingers and thought, so this is what it takes. Not innocence, not truth, just power placed behind the right lie. That evening, the mansion was quieter than usual. Rain tapped softly against the glass walls. Somewhere downstairs, staff moved like shadows. Elena sat in the sitting room with a blanket over her knees, the television on low, pretending not to watch. It was safer that way. People always revealed more when they thought you weren't listening. A smiling anchorwoman appeared on the screen. And in social news tonight, America's favorite young philanthropist, Sophia Cross, announced that this year's birthday celebration will once again double as a charity gala. Elena went completely still. There she was, Sophia. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect white dress. She stood under camera lights with children beside her and donors behind her, smiling that same polished smile Elena had once mistaken for kindness. The public loved her for it. The sweet daughter of a respected family, the face of youth charity campaigns, the golden girl who raised money, kissed cheeks, and made goodness look effortless. Angel on camera, executioner in private. Elena stared at the screen and felt 3 years collapse into a single breath. She remembered Sophia crying on cue, Sophia lowering her eyes while Elena was accused, Sophia saying nothing when the papers were signed, Sophia watching her disappear. The anchor kept talking. The gala, hosted at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, is expected to bring in politicians, business heirs, media figures, and several of the city's most influential families. Sophia turned toward reporters and laughed softly when someone asked whether she was too young to carry so much grace. Elena's grip tightened around the edge of the blanket. Grace. If only they knew. If only they had seen the girl behind closed doors. The one who smiled while another woman's life was fed to the dark. A banner flashed across the bottom of the screen with the date, the venue, and the words birthday and charity celebration. Open to invited guests only. Elena's eyes did not leave the screen. This was more than a party. It was a stage. Sophia would be there. Her parents would be there. Their allies would be there. Cameras, money, reputation, power, all in one room. The very world that had helped bury Elena would gather under chandeliers and call itself decent. A slow, cold smile touched her mouth. At last. Not because revenge was simple, not because she was ready, but because fate had just done something generous for the first time in years. It had handed her a door. Elena looked at Sophia's glowing face on the screen and said the words softly, like a vow meant only for herself. I'm going. The Grand Marlowe glittered like the kind of place built to make rich people feel immortal. Crystal chandeliers burned above polished marble. Waiters moved through the ballroom with trays of champagne balanced on white-gloved hands. Cameras flashed near the entrance. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. Everywhere Elena looked, she saw the same thing. Money dressed up as virtue. Perfect. Because this was exactly the kind of room where monsters came polished. She arrived alone. No dramatic entrance, no announcement, no hesitation. Her invitation had been acquired through channels Adrian would not have approved of, and the hotel staff did not dare question. Her dark gown was simple, expensive-looking, and impossible to place. Her hair was pinned back just enough to sharpen her face. The bracelet on her wrist caught the light once, then disappeared beneath silk. Not Elena Cross, not the forgotten girl who had been erased and buried. Tonight she was Elena Ward, a woman with documents, posture, and a face that could ruin the evening of anyone who remembered the dead. The first few minutes were almost disappointing. No one noticed her. Or rather, they noticed her, The way people at these events noticed everything, a glance, a curiosity, a silent ranking of beauty, wealth, and social value before moving on. Then one man near the champagne tower looked twice. Then a woman in silver stopped mid-sentence. Then another guest turned, frowned, and whispered something sharp into her husband's ear. Elena kept walking, slowly, calmly, as if she belonged there more than anyone else. That was the trick. Not hiding, not rushing, letting people doubt their own eyes before giving them anything to confirm. At the far side of the ballroom, under a spill of warm light and camera flashes, stood Sophia Cross, white dress, soft smile, one hand resting gracefully at her waist as she thanked donors, charmed reporters, and accepted praise like a woman born to wear it. America's sweetheart, the city's golden daughter, the girl who had once stood by and watched Elena's life be fed into a furnace. Elena stopped just long enough to look at her. Sophia laughed at something a reporter said. Then her eyes drifted across the room, and the laugh died. Even from a distance, Elena saw it happen in stages: recognition, disbelief, fear. Sophia's smile stayed on her face half a second too long, like a mask that had forgotten when to move. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. A donor beside her kept talking, unaware the woman in front of him had just seen a ghost. Good, Elena thought. Let it hurt. Across the room, another man turned toward the disturbance without understanding it. Ethan Cole, Sophia's boyfriend now, Elena's past once, or something close enough to count. He looked older than memory had left him. Sharper suit, broader shoulders, the polished confidence of a man who had learned to move easily among wealth. But when his gaze landed on Elena, all of that fell away. He stared, not politely, not curiously, like a man who had just seen the dead step into candlelight. For one reckless second, Elena felt the old world press against her ribs, the version of herself that had still believed love might be stronger than ambition, that loyalty might survive money, that Ethan might have looked harder, asked harder, fought harder. He hadn't, and that was all over now. Still, he was the first to move. He crossed the ballroom faster than etiquette allowed and stopped just in front of her, breathing unevenly, eyes fixed on her face. Elena? She tilted her head slightly, a perfect, faintly puzzled expression. I'm sorry? He went pale. Sophia was already coming toward them. So were her parents. So were half a dozen eyes pretending not to watch, exactly as Elena had hoped. You, Ethan swallowed. You look exactly like someone I used to know. Elena gave him a polite, almost apologetic smile. Then either she was very beautiful or you're about to embarrass yourself in public. A small ripple of laughter came from someone nearby. Not much, just enough to sting. Sophia reached them first. Her perfume hit Elena before her voice did. Soft, expensive, carefully chosen. The same kind she used to wear when she wanted the world to think innocence had a scent. For a moment, neither woman spoke. They simply looked at each other. Sophia's eyes moved over Elena's face as if searching for a seam, a flaw, a place where the disguise might crack. Elena, she said quietly. Elena's smile faded into polite confusion. I think you have the wrong person. Sophia's mother arrived next, already flustered. Her father close behind, face tight and bloodless. No one said welcome. No one said sorry. They all looked exactly like people who had just watched a coffin open from the inside. Sophia tried first. This isn't funny. Elena blinked. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. You disappeared 3 years ago, Ethan said, still staring. Everyone thought, yes, Elena cut in lightly, and I'm sure this is a fascinating shared hallucination for all of you, but my name is Elena Ward. That landed, not because they believed her, because they didn't. and uncertainty was sometimes more cruel than truth. Sophia's father spoke in a strained voice. "Young lady, perhaps we should speak privately." Elena turned to him with effortless calm. "You say that as if we've met." Her adoptive mother looked as though she might faint. Sophia recovered first, because Sophia always recovered first. That was what made her dangerous. She knew how to panic inwardly and smile outwardly. Around them, guests were watching now. Not openly, not rudely, but enough. A cluster near the bar had gone silent. A pair of women near the stage pretended to adjust their clutches while listening to every word. Sophia saw it too, and Elena saw the exact instant her sister made a decision, not to expose her immediately, not to cause a scene. No, something smarter, something crueler. Sophia's smile returned, polished and bright enough to fool a room full of strangers. Then she reached for Elena's hand. Warm fingers, controlled pressure, a performance of grace. "If I've made a mistake," Sophia said sweetly, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "then I owe you an apology. You just resemble someone our family once knew, very strongly." Elena held her gaze. "That must be unsettling." Sophia's smile sharpened by a fraction. "It is." Then, with all the poise of a perfect hostess, she turned to the guests who had begun circling the moment like sharks smelling blood. "Please forgive the confusion," she said with a soft laugh. "I would hate for my birthday to become boring. Miss Ward was just about to join us for the rest of the evening." There it was, an invitation wrapped in silk and poison. Ethan looked at Sophia sharply, as if he understood immediately that this was not generosity. The parents said nothing. They knew their daughter too well. Elena did not pull her hand away. She let the silence stretch just long enough for the room to wait on her answer. Then she smiled. Calm, elegant, interested. "I'd be delighted to stay." Sophia's fingers tightened once before letting go. And in that brief pressure, Elena felt the truth beneath the politeness. Her sister did not want her near out of kindness. She wanted her close enough to crush. Which was perfect, because Elena had not come to the gala to be welcomed. She had come to watch the people who buried her decide, in real time, whether they were looking at a ghost or a woman who had come back to ruin them. Sophia Cross was smart. That was what had always made her more dangerous than the rest of them. Her parents had lied out of fear. Ethan had failed out of weakness. But Sophia knew how to weaponize a room. She knew exactly when to cry, when to smile, when to sound merciful, and when to let other people do the ugliest work for her. So Elena was not surprised when the trap began gently. It started with champagne and soft voices. A woman in emerald silk approached with the kind of smile rich people wore when they wanted to insult someone without losing elegance. "Miss Ward, was it? I don't believe anyone knows which family you're with." Elena turned from the dessert table, a plate still in her hand. "Is that a requirement?" The woman laughed lightly. "Not officially." Another voice joined in, "Though it does help when one attends private events." A small circle was beginning to form now. Nothing dramatic at first, just curiosity wrapped in manners. Men with expensive watches, women with trained expressions, young heirs and daughters pretending they were amused, when in fact they were already scenting weakness. Sophia stood a little distance away, all white silk and polished concern, not intervening, not yet. "Elena Ward," one man repeated. "Strange. I'm fairly certain your name wasn't on the original guest list." Elena picked up her glass and took a slow sip. "Then I suppose your security team should be fired." A few people smiled despite themselves. Good. Let them enjoy her before they turned. That only made the next attack sharper. A blonde woman near the center of the group tilted her head. Or maybe she came in with someone. With who? Another asked. A pause, then someone said it. Maybe with no one. Soft laughter followed. There it was. The shift. Not confusion anymore. Permission? Sophia stepped forward at last, hands lightly clasped, the picture of reluctant grace. Please, she said gently. I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Elena almost admired it. That tone, that careful softness, the one that always made Sophia sound kinder than the people around her, even while she lit the match and watched others burn. I'm sure there is too, Elena said. Sophia smiled. Then perhaps you'd like to tell us how you came tonight. The circle tightened. Ethan had gone still at the edge of it, already sensing where this was headed. He looked at Sophia once, sharply, but she never met his eyes. Elena set her glass down. I walked through the front entrance. It was very modern. A couple of guests laughed. Sophia's smile did not move. You know what I mean. Yes, Elena said. I do. She did not explain further. That was the first thing that truly irritated them. People like this were used to power revealing itself on command. Name your family, state your status, produce your value, make us comfortable enough to decide how much respect you deserve. Elena did none of it. She just stood there in silence, elegant and unreadable, as if the room owed her more explanation than she owed it. An older man cleared his throat. Miss Ward, perhaps you don't understand. This is a private charitable event. The guest list was carefully curated. How beautiful for the guests, Elena said. A woman near him gave a sharp laugh. She's rude. No, another murmured. I think she's bluffing. That word moved through the little crowd like perfume. Bluffing. Yes, that fit better. A beautiful stranger with borrowed confidence. A woman who knew how to dress well enough to enter the room, but not well enough to survive inside it. Sophia lowered her voice, but not enough to stop the audience from hearing. If you're in some kind of trouble, you can tell me. Truly. I'd rather help than embarrass you. Elena met her eyes. There she was, the real Sophia, hidden beneath the charity smile, not asking if Elena needed help, offering help in the most humiliating way possible, publicly, maternally, from above, as if Elena were some desperate woman who had wandered into the wrong ballroom, hoping for leftovers. A younger guest leaned in. That's very kind of you, Sophia. Too kind, someone else added. If she snuck in once, she'll do it again somewhere else. Another woman looked Elena up and down. Honestly, I wondered. The dress is nice, but there's something off. The room rewarded that with a murmur, and once one person says it, others always find a way to agree. Yes, exactly. I thought so too. She doesn't look like she belongs to anyone. What a sentence, Elena thought. Not that she belongs nowhere, that she belongs to no one. In rooms like this, that was worse. Sophia gave a soft sigh, as though pained by all of it. Please, let's not be cruel. Which, of course, was the exact moment cruelty became respectable. A woman with diamond earrings stepped forward, touching her clutch. Actually, has anyone checked the gift table? That one was almost elegant in its shamelessness. Elena did not move. Another guest frowned. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, the woman said quickly. I'm only saying we don't know her, and now that we know she may not have been invited. She let the rest hang in the air. Perfect. A theft accusation without the vulgarity of saying thief. Sophia looked stricken. No, I would hate to think that, which meant every person in the room now had permission to think exactly that. Within seconds, the whispers turned. She came in alone. She avoided answering. She refused to identify herself. Maybe security should check her bag. She doesn't have one. Then her coat. Someone looked toward the staff. Why hasn't hotel security handled this yet? Ethan stepped in then, finally. That's enough. It should have helped. Instead, it made things worse, because now the room had what it always wanted most, tension it could feed on. Sophia turned to him with perfect confusion. Ethan, she hasn't done anything, he said. Not exactly a defense, Elena noticed. Not she belongs here. Not I know her. Just the thin moral line of a man trying not to look guilty in front of the wrong crowd. Sophia's eyes cooled for half a second. Then she looked wounded instead. No one said she had. A lie so smooth it almost deserved applause. Elena remained silent. That was the part none of them understood. Why she wasn't fighting harder. Why she wasn't panicking. Why she wasn't trying to save herself. But Elena had learned something in Blackwater that no ballroom full of predators would ever teach each other. When people are desperate to humiliate you, the cruelest thing you can do is give them room. So she did. She let them talk. Let them speculate. Let the men become smug and the women become inventive. Let the polished moral skin of the room peel back, inch by inch, until underneath it was the same thing she had always known, lived under wealth without consequence, appetite, not for truth, for permission. And now they had all but devoured each other to earn it. At last, Sophia stepped close enough for only those nearest to hear clearly. "Miss Ward," she said, voice full of pained patience, "if there has been a misunderstanding, all you have to do is tell us the truth." Elena looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, not warmly, not brightly, just enough to make the air shift. "The truth," she said softly. "That's dangerous in a room like this." Something in Sophia's face flickered, the first real crack. The crowd did not understand it, but Sophia did, because beneath Elena's calm was something far worse than embarrassment, recognition, memory, a woman who had seen this exact performance before. Sophia recovered quickly. "Then let's make this simple." She turned to the guests, all grace and regret. "I think, for everyone's peace of mind, we should ask hotel security to verify Miss Ward's invitation and search her coat. If there's nothing wrong, I'll personally apologize." A collective breath moved through the circle. There it was. The public strip down, dressed in etiquette. The kind of humiliation that rich people loved because they could call it procedure afterward. Elena glanced around the room, at the eager faces, at the women pretending not to enjoy this, at the men already relieved it wasn't them, at Ethan, pale and furious and still too weak to stop any of it, at Sophia, standing in white like a saint offering mercy to someone she was about to crucify. And then Elena did the last thing anyone expected. She handed her plate to a passing waiter. "Of course," she said. The room went quiet, not because they had won, because they suddenly weren't sure. Elena moved with unhurried precision, setting down her glass, smoothing one hand over the sleeve of her coat, then reaching calmly for the collar. If she had refused, they would have torn her apart with certainty. If she obeyed like this, the certainty cracked. Sophia's gaze dropped instantly to Elena's wrist, waiting, watching, looking for proof, the prison mark, the hidden sign, anything that would turn this from social humiliation into annihilation. That was the real game, not theft, exposure. Sophia wanted the room to discover that the girl she once buried had crawled back from hell. She wanted Elena dragged out, not merely shamed, and that was why Elena had returned, to let her sister reveal the full size of her hunger. Slowly, Elena slipped off the coat. Beneath it was not panic, Not disorder, not evidence of desperation. It was a perfectly cut gown in dark silk that transformed her from mysterious to devastating. The room actually gasped. Not metaphorically, actually. Because humiliation works best when the victim cooperates with the role assigned to her. And Elena had just stepped out of that role completely. She laid the coat across the back of a chair and extended her arms slightly, as if indulging an inconvenience. "Well?" she asked. No one moved. The woman who had first implied theft looked embarrassed now. The blonde who'd mocked her stared too openly. Several of the men suddenly found the floor or ceiling very interesting. Sophia did not. She was still staring at Elena's wrist, at the bracelet, at the place where the prison mark should have destroyed her. But there was only polished stone, elegant, expensive-looking, harmless. Sophia's face lost color. Impossible. Yes, Elena thought. That's what you should be feeling. One of the guests tried to recover. The search should still be completed. Then do it, Elena said. No one volunteered. Because now it would mean touching her. And touching her would mean taking responsibility for everything that came next. Sophia's friend in diamond earrings finally stepped forward, brittle with pride. Fine. She reached toward Elena's side, searching too quickly, too carelessly, more desperate than convincing. Then her expression changed. Her hand emerged holding something small. A single diamond earring. The same woman who had implied theft let out a sharp cry. "My earring!" The room erupted. "There!" I knew it. She took it, Sophia exhaled, almost invisibly. There it is, Elena thought. The backup plan, because Sophia never relied on just one knife. The woman with the earring lifted her chin in triumph. "What do you say now?" Elena looked at the jewelry piece in her fingers, then at Sophia, then back at the crowd. When she spoke, her voice was very calm. "I say," she said, "that planting evidence was quicker than I expected." Outrage rippled instantly. "How dare you? That's absurd. She's cornered, now she lies." But Elena was no longer speaking to them. She was speaking through them, cutting straight toward the only person in the room who mattered. "You should have chosen someone steadier," she said, eyes on Sophia. Her hand shook. The woman holding the earring looked down at her own fingers in horror, and that was enough. The first fracture, because once doubt enters a crowd, it spreads faster than cruelty. Elena took one step forward, no rush, no fear, just pressure. "Tell me," she said to the woman with the earring, "which side was it worn on?" The woman blinked. "What?" "The ear," Elena said. "Left or right?" Silence. The woman hesitated. "Too long." Elena nodded slightly. "You don't know." Color rushed up the woman's throat. A man near the back frowned. If it was hers, she would know immediately. Another woman whispered, "I thought she said it was missing from earlier." Sophia stepped in at once. "This is getting ridiculous." "Yes," Elena said, "it is." Then she turned, slowly, letting her gaze pass over the faces around her one by one. The donors, the wives, the heirs, the polished scavengers. A room full of educated, charitable, socially celebrated people, she said, her voice low but carrying effortlessly. "And it took less than 10 minutes for all of you to become a mob." No one interrupted. Not because they agreed, because they felt seen. And people like this hated nothing more than being seen clearly. "You didn't want proof," Elena continued. "You wanted permission. Permission to sneer. Permission to invent. Permission to enjoy someone beneath you." Her eyes stopped on Sophia. "And some of you," she said softly, "have had practice." Sophia went still, not theatrically, dangerously, because now she understood. This was not the frightened girl they had once sacrificed. This woman knew how rooms worked, knew how shame worked, knew how to let cruelty overperform until it exposed itself, knew how to wait. Elena reached for her coat, draped it over one arm, and gave the crowd a final devastatingly polite smile. "If any of you still wish to search me," she said, "do it properly. Call the police, pull the hotel footage, review the tables, ask why a woman would accuse me of theft without even knowing her own missing jewelry." No one answered, because they all knew what would happen then. A real investigation, a real trail, real consequences, which meant the game they loved was over the moment it became reality. The silence turned ugly, embarrassed, expensive. Sophia's mother looked away first. Her father followed. Ethan said nothing, but Elena saw the truth in his face now. Not just shock, regret. Too late as always. Sophia was the only one still holding herself together. Barely. She smiled, but this time the smile looked carved rather than worn. "A misunderstanding," she said. Elena almost laughed. "No," she said, "a rehearsal." Sophia's eyes flashed. In that instant, no one else in the ballroom mattered. Not the guests, not Ethan, not the family. Just the two of them, standing in the center of spilled elegance and failed humiliation, each measuring what the other had become. And for the first time that night, Sophia truly understood the scale of her mistake. The girl she had buried had not died in Blackwater. She had learned, she had sharpened, and worst of all, she had come back smarter. Adrian had watched her from the shadows long enough. At the gala, he saw what no one else fully understood. Elena was never a broken girl stumbling through danger. She was controlled, patient, and lethal in a way that made humiliation look like strategy. That was the moment she stopped being a curiosity to him and became something far more dangerous and far more interesting. So Adrian started digging, quietly, thoroughly, ruthlessly. What he found reshaped everything. Elena had not been some unstable nobody swallowed by Blackwater. She had been the Cross family's adopted daughter, raised under their roof until she became inconvenient. At 18, she was framed, erased, and thrown into prison so the family could protect their real daughter, preserve their public image, and secure Sophia's future. That motive tracks directly with the original setup of the family sacrifice and the sisters' polished charity persona. After that, Adrian stopped treating Elena like a strange possession and started treating her like a weapon under pressure. He still controlled too much, still watched too closely, still spoke as if she belonged inside his reach. But now, when the room turned against her, he was already moving the board in her favor. And Elena understood something that frightened her more than prison ever had. Adrian Vale might be the only man powerful enough to help her destroy the Cross family, which made him the most dangerous man in the world to trust. They never called it an alliance. Adrian did not offer trust, and Elena did not offer truth. But after the gala, something shifted between them. He stopped pretending she was fragile. She stopped pretending he was easy to fool. What formed in the silence between them was not peace. It was recognition, a deal with a monster. He gave her cover, intelligence, and space to move. She gave him nothing clean enough to call honesty, only results, instincts, and a mind sharp enough to make him watch her more closely than ever. Their interests aligned, and for now, that was enough. The tension between them changed too. Darker, quieter, more dangerous. Adrian still spoke like a man used to being obeyed, still invaded her space without warning, still saw through masks she had worn for years. But Elena began noticing the fracture beneath his cruelty, the grief he hid like a wound stitched shut too fast. The moments his voice changed when memory touched it, the way control seemed less like arrogance and more like the only thing keeping him from breaking. Outside the mansion, the Cross family struck first. Rumors spread, invitations vanished, cameras began appearing where Elena went. Men followed her, Questions surfaced about prison records, forged papers, missing years. Then came worse: hired pressure, social traps, quiet attempts to drag her into public ruin, and finally the threat of force. The hunt was no longer aimed only at her. Anyone could see Adrian Vale had taken an interest, and now enemies began circling through that connection too. That escalation tracks with the later parts of the source, where surveillance, capture pressure, violence, and Elena's skills become impossible to hide. And then someone pushed too far. When they came for her, they did not find a frightened, unstable girl. They found the woman Blackwater had forged, and for the first time, the harmless act fell away completely. By the time the Cross family finally saw the real Elena, it was already too late. The girl they had framed at 18, buried in Blackwater, and written off as broken, was gone. In her place stood someone colder, quieter, and far more dangerous, a woman shaped by survival, sharpened by patience, and stripped of every illusion that had once made her easy to betray. She had learned everything prison was designed to teach the weak: how to fight without warning, how to lie without blinking, how to disappear when watched, how to wait longer than her enemies could imagine. And now she used every lesson. Sophia's perfect public image began to crack first. Small exposures, contradictions, quietly surfaced lies. Then the parents, old documents, buried decisions, private deals, and the truth about who had signed Elena away when it was convenient. One by one, allies who had once protected the family began stepping back, not out of conscience, but out of fear. Elena made them feel exactly what they had once forced on her: uncertainty, helplessness, and the slow terror of realizing that control was leaving their hands. For the first time, the Cross family was not watching a victim return. They were watching judgment arrive. And just when Elena was close enough to taste revenge, the ground shifted beneath her again. Because the betrayal that sent her to prison had not been the whole truth. It had been only the part they allowed her to see. Revenge did not come as cleanly as Elena once imagined it would. By the end, the Cross family's mask was gone. Their lies were public. Their alliances had rotted through. Sophia was finally forced to stand in the light without charity, without cameras, without her carefully rehearsed innocence, and face what she had done to the girl she helped bury. The parents lost the protection of reputation, the sister lost the protection of performance, and the truth, once exposed, did what prison could not: it made them small. But victory did not feel like innocence restored. It felt heavier than that, because revenge had given Elena justice, but it had also revealed what survival had cost her. Blackwater had not only taught her how to endure, it had taught her how to detach, how to weaponize pain, how to become cold enough to outlive people who still believed softness was safe. She had won. But standing in the ruins, the real question was no longer whether the family deserved to fall. It was whether there was anything left in her that still knew how to live after the falling stopped. That was where Adrian belonged in the ending, not as a savior, not as some gentle cure. He was never that. He was the one man ruthless enough to recognize what she had become without looking away. He saw the violence in her, the calculation, the emptiness revenge had carved out, and he stayed. And Elena, for her part, saw what no one else ever really saw in him. Not just the monster the world feared, but the grieving boy still trapped inside the man who had built his life out of control. What they reached in the end was not a fairy tale. It was something harder, and therefore more believable. Trust, earned slowly, closeness without illusion, a choice to remain, Not because either of them was safe, but because both of them had finally found someone who could look directly at the damage and not flinch. So the ending lands with triumph, but not innocence. Elena gets her revenge. She exposes the truth. She survives long enough to take back her name, but the final victory is quieter than destruction. It is that vengeance is no longer the only thing left inside her. And Adrian, dangerous, wounded, still half Shadow himself, is the proof.